Heather, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thanks, Makone. Okay, we should be starting in about 5 minutes. But it looks like we're still waiting for Zaphesheya to join us. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It looks like we're still waiting for a couple of people to join, so I'm going to give them 2 more minutes and then we will start. Okay, I am going to get started. I'm sure that there will still be more people joining us as we get going. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's joined us. We're looking forward to a really informative session. I'd also like to thank the speakers who will be participating in today's workshop. You'll be hearing from Ms. Heather Thuynsma, Ms. Makone Maja, Ms. Zaphesheya Dlamini, and myself, Andrea du Toit. We're all from the University of Pretoria's Faculty of Humanities, and we work in the communications department. And today we will be talking about improving your research visibility, specifically for students who are generally only starting out with their publishing careers. And so we need to make sure that people are seeing the research that you're doing. Today's session is part of the Open Publishing Festival, which has been taking place over the last week and a half. And we're super excited to be participating and to be joining them as well. I'm going to hand over to the first speaker, Heather Thuynsma, who will be introducing ESI Press to everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrea. Apologies. I'll get that right. And thank you everyone for joining us here at the ESI's first workshop as part of an ongoing series, I believe, that will happen as we go forward in the next couple of months. I am very grateful for the opportunity to be able to share an initiative that is housed in the University of Pretoria, but specifically the Faculty of Humanities. And it's really nice to be working with a crew of such young and vibrant women who are running the press and who are making this press as super significant, as you'll see in a moment. We are called the Emerging Scholars Press, and ESI for short, not ESP, as some of the psychology students like to talk to us about, but we have developed for a very real reason. We realized that postgraduate students were not given the same opportunity as accredited academics to be able to publish and to get their work visibilized outside of their own departments and sometimes outside of their own faculties. So we decided that it would be a very good idea to try and get postgraduate students from all levels published on various platforms. And as a result, we developed the ESI Press. This is something that happened during lockdown. So beginning middle of last year, the press is now fully operational and up and running. As I mentioned, it is anchored within the Faculty of Humanities, although most of the students who are running this press with me are from the Department of Political Sciences at the faculty. Makone Maja is probably the only outlier there who comes out of law and out of the EMS, the Economic Management Sciences faculty. So we are an interdisciplinary bunch, and we're looking forward to encouraging more scholars and more graduate students from across the disciplines, also from not just from the University of Pretoria, but across institutions as well. This is a purpose-built press. As I mentioned, it's also, besides publicizing and publishing manuscripts from across the disciplines and from students across the gamut, we are also trying very hard to employ students, graduate students who are trained to do certain areas and certain parts of the publishing process. So we call it a holistic learning environment because, as you'll see in a few moments, we do offer some work opportunities within the press going forward. And also, we focus on producing open access resources. So our idea is we want the information out. We do not want that to be a burden for students. We do not want it to be a burden for anyone who wants to access and to engage with the information, with the publications. So therefore, all our publications, whether it be journal or book, are open access. So we offer, as I mentioned, a holistic experience. We encourage authors, specifically graduates, to approach us to submit concept documents and concept papers. And we also have employ students as translators. We have through our Unit for Academic Literacy and through the Faculty of Humanities Department of Ancient and Modern Languages, the Afrikaans Department, the African Languages Department, and the English Department are able to offer translations into almost all of South Africa's languages and a few European languages as well. Students are also employed as copy editors and proofreaders, again through the English Department and through the Unit for Academic Literacy. Very, very keen partners for us and who have been doing a wonderful job so far in getting us up and running. There is also opportunity for students out of the Publishing Sciences Department, which is out of the Engineering and Information Management faculty, as well as Information Design, which is out of our own Faculty of Humanities' Information program. That Information Design program won a Lurie last year, Lurie Award, for being the best education platform across the continent. So there are opportunities for students, graduate students, as well as early career scholars, in order to get involved in the press in more ways than one. And we encourage you to be able to do that. Just to get a sense of what our publications look like, we have, at the moment, there are 4 books that are suddenly up on the site, and I'll take you through the site in a few seconds. But we also host a number of different journals, some accredited and some are on their way to being accredited journals. The African Disability Rights Yearbook out of the School of Law. Alternate Horizons is a postgraduate publishing platform that Andrea du Toit runs. And that has picked up steam incredibly. It's only a few months old, and it has really published some really good quality postgraduate work. Historia is probably the oldest journal on the system, and it goes back to 1956. Okay. There's Image and Text, Journal of Decolonizing Disciplines, the Journal of Geography Education in Africa, the Journal of Student Affairs in Africa, the Pretoria Student Law Review, the Teacher Education and Flexible Learning in Africa, also from the Education Faculty, Strategic Review for Southern Africa from Political Science, and Yesterday and Today, which is also out of the Education Faculty. So we're very nicely covered across different disciplines and different faculties, and we're looking to bring on a few more journals, which Makone will no doubt talk to you about a little bit later. Just to give you a little bit of insight, so Emerging Scholars Press, I'll take you to the website now quickly, just so you have a sense of what that looks like. This is us, the press itself. We, as I said, host a number of journals. And this is the UP Journal site, so this gives you an idea of the different journals that are up on the platform. Historia is the old one I mentioned. Image and Text is out of the Visual Arts Department in the faculty and the School of Arts. Journal of Decolonizing Disciplines. The Journal for Student Affairs is one of our largest journals as well. That has been recruited from the University of Stellenbosch and is now being hosted on UP Journal's platform as well. So that gives you a sense of where we are. I'll just give you a quick look at the kind of books that we produce. Oops, sorry. That one didn't work there. I'll just go through. Sorry, it's the... So we've got concept notes. If you are interested in publishing with the ESI Press, please go ahead and send us a concept note submission. There is the template there for you. There is also a list of the author's guidelines for the manuscript submission, just to give you a sense of what we are looking for and what we are recruiting. The style sheet is there too, and also contact details. So as I will hand over in a second, Makone Maja is is helping us manage the UP Journals page. So she's in charge of all the journals that are up on the site. And Andrea du Toit, who will talk a little bit later on her ESI books. They are, she's the one who's managing our book projects. We have a number of interesting books that are coming out. We have just released one, and I'm sorry, I'm sure Andrea will be able to share the books from her side in a second. There seems to be a problem with Safari, but we've just launched the Earth Songs book, which was published probably 2 weeks ago, and we have another one coming out on Tanzania. We also have a series of books coming out on food, a recipe book also due out in the middle of next year, in which we are going to recruit students from across the university to help us not only cook recipes, but also photograph and to be part of the recipe book. So those are some of the projects that are online and that we have taken care of and we have done so far. I'm not sure if there are any questions anyone would like to answer or ask rather that I can answer, and otherwise we can hand over to you again, Andrea.
Hi, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm quickly just going to share my screen so that I can go through the books, and then I will be handing over to Makone for her presentation. So it should be coming up. Okay, so one of the books we recently published is Earth Songs by Paul Weinberg. This is a photo book. And as you can see on here, we have some of the notes on that. So once you visit our website, you can browse through the different books. We also had this consumer product testing across countries in Africa, which is one of the more academic books that we have published. And this book is in progress to become more populated. Then you can see here we recently did a Sepedi Afrikaans book, so it's called the Sepedi Verspo, and that was also completed recently. And for all of our books, you can click on this button here for a PDF copy. Because our books are open access, you can access them and download them and read through them yourself, which is really great. I'm going to hand over to Makone now so that she can get started on hers.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and hello, everybody. I'm going to quickly share my screen now, and we will get started. So if everybody can share my screen, oh, let me do this instead. Let me share a tab, which might be a bit of a problem because I'll be going back and forth. Okay, I think that should be much better. I am using Canva to do my presentation, and I will start. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. Our goal is, again, to help you with your visibility on the internet as an upcoming researcher. So first part of the session's been done. That was by Heather and Andrea. I'm going to do the rest of the second part, which is going to be primarily touching on our open access platform, UP Journals. I'm also going to do a quick demo for you on how you can make submissions on our UP Journals platform. And then I'm going to be speaking to you as an individual and how your research is looking on the internet and how we can improve that. And then I'm going to share some tips with you, some platforms that you can use to improve how you're looking on the interwebs. So that is me. My name is Makone, and I'm going to be handling this part of the presentation. Okay, so we're going to kick this off with a poll, actually, and Andrea's going to cue in our first poll quickly. And the poll is basically just trying to get you guys to be interactive throughout the session so it's not too monotonous. And what I'm asking you in the poll is, when you Google yourself, what comes up? So what pages come up? Is it Facebook? Is it an article that you wrote? Is it your LinkedIn page? Is it your work page maybe? This is not a shaming exercise. I just want to see how much utility we'll be providing, if any, or how much utility you'll be getting, if any, from this presentation. So just quickly go on your browser, whatever browser that you use, type your name in. A little narcissistic, I know, but just type your name in and answer the poll as soon as Andrea cues it in. So while Andrea puts up the poll, you go type your name and give me the results, share the results with me from the poll. Okay, so Andrea tells me that the poll is up and the responses are coming in. I'm not sure if everybody can see them. I'm going to give you 2 minutes and then I'm going to close the poll. As the poll comes in, I'll do a drum roll. Okay. Wow, really interesting results. Somebody has a namesake. Okay. 1 more minute. Okay. So you can close the poll. Andrea, thank you so much. Then I'm going to tell you guys what the results are. I hope you can see them. So 13 responses. No, more than 13. Let's see. It's about 20 responses. And the number one response was your Facebook and LinkedIn as well as Instagram. Instagram profiles come up when you Google yourself. Now, the reason I did that is because as an upcoming researcher who's looking to get funding, who's looking to build your pedigree in the space, your stakeholders such as the NRF, right, the National Research Fund, want to see more than your Facebook and LinkedIn profiles when they Google you. You know, they want your research to come up, and that's what we're going to help you with today. So I'm going to touch on open access publishing and how that's going to help you increase your visibility across the internet, and which Heather's already spoken quite a bit about this, but what you can do on UP journals to help you with spreading your name as a researcher across that space. So open access publishing entails just basically making research freely available. And that's what we're trying to do at UP Journals, is give you rich quality information for free, making information egalitarian so that anybody with an internet connection can basically get access to the highest research outputs that anybody can access. And in the age of information, we see that we're moving quite rapidly to that open access publishing. People often make the remark that a 13-year-old kid in West Africa with an internet connection has more access to information than the president of the United States did in the 1950s. So this is something that we're really moving towards. And you will notice if you go on the UP Journals website, which I'll share the link with you momentarily, you will see that our journals are not paywalled, right? So you still get access to some of the highest caliber researchers, not just in South Africa, but in the world, because our journals actually have authors from across the continent and across the globe. You'll see that you get access to all that research. And some of the benefits of this are that as a researcher, it allows you to expand your audience, your impact, and your reach. So your research is able to help more people. It's able to get into the hands of more people. And what that does in turn is it drives up your citations, right? And that's how you grow your pedigree or your notoriety as a researcher, is through citations. And the higher the citations for an individual researcher, the more credible they are, but so is that research institution, whether it's a university or a different institution, that institution's credibility also grows. And lastly, what we're trying to promote with open access publishing is the free flow of knowledge and ideas, because that allows for an informed and robust public discourse in the public square, and that's always a good thing, right? So we encourage you guys as emerging scholars to look to UP journals to make your submission, or to engage with the platform to see how you can contribute. If not as an author, as a reader, that's also fine, but I'm sure most of us tuning in are upcoming authors or authors already, and I will show you how to do that shortly. So what is UP Journals? Heather's already showed you some of the journals that we host on there. And I've shared the link to UP Journals with you here. So UP Journals is hosted on a platform called OJS, Open Journal Systems. And what you can find on OJS is those 12 journals that Heather shared with you, some of which are indexed on these gigantic databases like Scopus and Web of Science. Others are accredited, which is always a plus, accredited by the Department of Higher Education and Training. I will share some of those with you later. So you've already seen those journals Heather shared with you, and who can make a submission on UP Journal? So anybody can make a submission, and we encourage you to do that. Obviously, it will be dependent on the subject that you are specializing in or looking to specialize in as a researcher. So if you just visit that website and read those brief about pages about the different journals, you'll be able to engage with a journal that suits your research or your career best. How does the submissions work? I'm gonna change tabs now so that I can share with you how our submissions are made. And Andrea, who's the managing director for one of the journals there, has lended us her platform so that we can let me do this, so that we can do a demo with it. Okay, so I'm now sharing the UP Journals platform, and this is what it looks like when you visit it. So these are all the journals that we're currently hosting. We're definitely going to have more next year. I know we're going to host the South African Economics and Management Sciences Journal and others as well. Different subjects from law to history to politics to economics. So there's a field for everyone. If you log on to the UP Journals platform, if you haven't already registered, you will start first by creating a profile, and then your profile you will decide what how much access you want to have on that profile. You will either access it as an author or as a reader, right? And then if you're looking to make a submission, you will choose your journal. For now, we're going to use Alternate Horizons. And if you look here, it says we invite all students to submit their work here. So I'm going to click on that link, and it's going to take me into that individual journals page. And there you have the current issue, you have the archives, the style sheets for author guidelines, if you're looking to make a submission, the announcements page, which you can subscribe to by becoming a reader or an author, and the about page, right? But we're looking to make a submission. So I'm going to click, it says here, make a new submission or view your pending submission. We haven't yet made a submission, so we're going to start off first by making one. So we're going to click make a new submission. And remember, this is just a demo. So a lot of this information is not going to be using actual text from an article. So then it takes you to the back end of our UP Journals page, to the alternate horizons page. If you've subscribed to more than one journal, when you click there, all those journals will come up on the list. But now we're only looking to submit to alternate horizons, right? And then you're going to click the section that you are looking to submit to. If you click that drop-down menu, you will see all the different sections that appear on the alternate horizons issues. Some journals will have, for example, editorial as a section or book reviews as a section. Alternate Horizons has these three, and we're looking to make a submission to the articles section. So we're going to click articles. If you wanted to make an opinion submission, then it would be that, or working paper submission, then it would be this. But for us, it's articles. And then you have to agree to the submission requirements, basically just saying that this is your work, you didn't plagiarize anybody, that it's in the format that is accepted by Alternate Horizons, that you have cited your references using URLs, the text is as advised, and that it adheres to the stylistic and bibliographic requirements, right? So you tick all those boxes. If you don't, you won't be able to go through, right? And then you can leave comments for the editor if you have any. I have none, so I'm not going to leave any comments. And then finally, agree to the privacy statement. Then we're going to click Save and Continue, right? Once you click Save and Continue, it allows you to upload your file. So remember when we started on the first page, it asked for the file format to be either in PDF or Word. So we're going to upload a file. I'm just going to pick randomly from my download. So I'm going to click this file. It's a PDF, so it'll go through. Then it's going to ask me about the kind of file that it is. If it's an article text, if it's data, or you just say other. But if it's an article text, then you say this. This one is an article text, so we'll say article text, and then we'll be able to save and continue. So click Save and Continue. And then we come to the metadata page. Very crucial, especially for somebody that's looking to research visibility or having their research be more accessible on the internet, is how you structure your research, right? Andrea is going to speak more extensively about how you title your research, the abstracts that you will use for that research, as well as the keywords. For now, I'm just showing you the mechanical processes of using UP Journals, how easy it is. So I won't go into all that much detail, but I know Andrea will. And for the title, we're just going to say testing 1, 2, 3, right? And that asterisk is indicative of the fact that if you don't have a title, you cannot actually continue. You will not be able to proceed. I don't have a subtitle, so I'm going to leave that blank. I do encourage abstract, so I'll just say testing again. And then a list of contributors. It automatically enlists me as a contributor, right? But say I have a co-author and I want to add their name, or say your name is not automatically generated there. I'm going to delete myself, and then I'm going to show you how you can add yourself as a contributor, right? So given name is Makone's, family name is my surname there, and then my email address quickly. And then the country that I'm based in is South Africa. I'm going to click South Africa, user details. So it says here that you can use your ORCID page as your user details. So if you have an ORCID ID, then you can just go to ORCID and click on your whole URL. It's going to be what appears here. I'm just going to use Dr. Forsman's page for now, because I have another demo later coming on about how you are going to use your ORCID. But for now, we're going to click this URL link and paste it. Oh no, you probably can't even see that I'm copying a URL from ORCID, but you'll see it now when I paste it on there. So it's my ORCID ID as well as the whole entire link, right? So that's going to be my URL page. Affiliation, I will say University of Pretoria. Okay, so it's rejecting my link. Let me see what I did wrong. It's rejecting it. Okay, we'll come back to this. And then if you have a bias statement, you can add it. Contributors role is author, so that's me. I'm the author, not the translator. And then if you are the principal contact for correspondence during the editorial process, so that when you have a back and forth with the reviewers, you can be contacted, you click that box over there. And then if you want ORCID authentication, you can click there. For now, we'll just leave that. And then you save, right? Once you save, your name will come up when we look you up as one of the people that wrote the article. If there's another contributor, you can add. As far as I've experienced, UP Journals does not limit the number of contributors or authors on an article. And there's the name, the email, the role, that I'm the primary contact, that my name should come up when you view the article. And then keywords, right? Again, Andrea is going to talk especially about this, but keywords are very crucial for research visibility. I think, yeah, very crucial for research visibility. So make use of your keywords very carefully. We encourage about 10 to 15 so that you don't have half of your article consisting of half of the first page of your article consisting of just keywords. For now, I'll just show you how to do it here. So I'll say key, and then you press the enter key, right? Say enter so that it creates a bubble for that keyword, and it will say word. If you click the space tab, nothing's going to happen. So I'm going to click the space tab now quickly and show you. Nothing happens. It doesn't highlight that word as an individual word. But if I click the enter key, then it highlights that word, right? So again, you want to click the enter key so that it creates individual bubbles for your keywords. And then we're going to click save and continue. And it is basically that simple to make a submission. We're done. And then it advises you of the next steps, where your article will either be accepted or declined with comments. If you are accepted, then it will go through the entire editorial process, which I think it's very encouraging for an emerging researcher to experience the entire behind the scenes of what it takes to actually publish an article, right? And then once it's been reviewed, you have some back and forth correspondence with a reviewer. After that, it goes to copy editing and then layout, and then you are published. So yeah, that's how it looks. Let's see some of the articles right now that Andrea has on her current issue. So if you had chosen a section, it would appear. If you had chosen the section articles to submit to, it would appear under articles. And then when you click on that author, there's the name, and that's the affiliation. If they had entered their ORCID, it would appear underneath there. For now, they didn't. Your article gets a DOI. So a DOI is like it's a digital object identifier. It's like an ID number basically for your article, so that if there are articles that are similarly titled on the internet, or authors who, as we saw earlier, you share a name with, yours will be distinguished through that digital object identifier. So people will never confuse your article with somebody else's. They are the keywords, and there's the abstract, and then the PDF will appear here, all copy edited and laid out and published, right? Which published on an open journal, which is what we're trying to encourage, more visibility, not less. So I'm going to change the screen that I'm sharing. Sorry, let me just see the comments. I see Andrea and Heather tackling them. Thanks, guys. I'm going to change the screen that I'm sharing so that I can go back to my slides. And Andrea has queued up the next poll, where I'm just trying to see how many of you have used OJS before. If not, say no. If you have, that's awesome. If you haven't, I hope this tutorial showed you how extremely easy and accessible it is. make use of these platforms, guys, especially because then for most of these journals, I know there are no submission fees, so extremely accessible, and yeah, you can be a whole published author from using that platform. We're going to close the poll in 1 minute. See, the responses are coming in, more no's than yeses, which is awesome. I'm glad, because that means you got something out of that short part of the presentation. One more no. Okay. So again, if you just want to engage with the platform as a reader, you're more than welcome to do that. You can also identify authors that you can co-publish with from the platform. I close the poll, and yeah, we had more no's than yeses, which I'm actually happy about, because that means, yeah, this was beneficial to you. I'm gonna switch back to my presentation. Okay, so what happens after a submission is made? That's item number 5 over here. So you go through the entire editorial process. Again, peer review, copy-proof editing, layout, and then it is published. And then about their copyright policy. I know this is an issue of concern to most people, right? Ownership of your work. And you don't have to worry about anything as far as UP Journals is concerned. They use this attribution, non-commercial, creative common license, where you get to retain ownership as an author, and they get to distribute your work for non-commercial purposes and adapt the text. So they don't make crazy edits to that text. They just get to tweak it here and there. And again, they are, as far as I've engaged, not that many journals on there with submission fees. And the reason I keep highlighting this is because some of these journals that you see on UP Journals are indexed on those huge databases, some of the largest databases like Scopus and Web of Science, right? And if you quickly just Google submission fees on Scopus, a figure that starts from $150 to $9,900 comes up as being their range of submission fees for the journals that they have on their platform. So you can leverage UP Journals to rub shoulders with some of the biggest journals and authors in the world without even paying a cent, right? So I do encourage you. I know, for example, the South African Medical Journal also has a flat rate fee of about 5,700 as a flat rate submission fee, and that's VAT exclusive. So it's quite costly to publish. And when you have free resources at your disposal, I suggest you make use of them. And next is some of those tips that I have for you on how you can increase your visibility. One is being published, right? So I've already taken you through our journals. You can look to them to publish at. We have accredited journals on there, as we indicated, accredited by the Department of Higher Education and Training. And again, some of those journals are indexed on those big indexing platforms. So if I'm giving you like high-level pro tips, I would say target those journals. But if they're too intimidating for you and you want to start, I would say look to Alternate Horizons, for example. It still gives you saw their page. I mean, it's first of all, it looks incredible. you get a DOI, your name comes up against your work, and it's in the same, it's housed in the same repository as your big journals like Historia and so forth. So that's my one tip. The other one is collaborating with established researchers, right? I mean, at the university, we have some of the highest ranking NRF candidates in the country. So I would say look to collaborating with your supervisor, for example, on a paper. That will also give you credibility as an upcoming author. And then third is publishing open access, because again, your research goes far and wide, which is what you want your research to do, to actually solve the problems it's intended to solve, to help people. I've thumbnailed some of those journals that you saw earlier. And then fourthly is creating profiles on academic platforms as well as social media platforms. So our colleague Zaphesheya is going to speak more on the social media platforms, how you can use them for research purposes. So it's not so bad that your Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn profiles came up when you Googled yourself. And then I'm going to touch on the academic platforms. So that's your ORCID, your Google Scholar, the UP repository, or your university's repository, and Scopus, as well as Web of Science. Not in so much detail, because that, again, is quite high level. Okay, so these are those platforms that I mentioned earlier. So ORCID, I'm going to start off with ORCID, and then I'm going to move on to the rest. I'm going to speed through this because we have another demo coming in for ORCID, and I would like to get through the entire presentation. So ORCID. Why should you create an ORCID ID? And what the heck is ORCID anyway, for those of you that don't know? So ORCID is a one-stop shop for all information about a researcher. If you're looking to find out about, for example, your supervisor, say you are aware of a researcher and his name is Prof. David Marie, and you want to see maybe his education history, you want to see all the research that he's done, you want to see his profile on those big databases like Web of Science. Where can you find all that information in one place? Or maybe you are a different type of stakeholder. Maybe you are the National Research Fund and you want to grant a researcher funding, but you want to see that they've received funding in the past and that funding has actually resulted in research outputs, right? That researcher actually followed through with their research after having been granted the funding. Where can you get all that information? That is ORCID. ORCID also allows you to integrate with Google Scholar, with the bigger repositories, so that all that information is collated in one space. All your research and professional career can be found in one place. And some of the fields of inquiry that you will see on ORCID, and I will share with you, are like your education history, if you've been invited positions and distinctions, if you've been invited to any. You also have membership of service. So that's in the instance where you are part of a professional body, then you will enlist it on ORCID, and you can authenticate it with that organization, right? So that's like you get what would be on Twitter or Instagram, a check mark. You also have that on ORCID, where a professional body, say you're part of SICA, for example, that professional body authenticates that you are really part of them on ORCID. You also have works, which is our primary focus for today. Works, your research outputs. Those research outputs are not just listed flippantly, but you will find the DOI of that article. Again, that's that digital object identifier, or an article's identity number. You find the DOI, you find the ISSN number of that article, you find the journal where the article was published, the article or the book was published. You also find the subtitle or the abstract of that that article. So ORCID really packs all that information concisely and presented in a very palatable way. So I'm going to share two ORCID profiles with you from some of our researchers. And I see Andrea's queued up other poll about whether or not you have an ORCID ID. I see more people than not have ORCID IDs, which is good, right? So take part in the poll. Let us know. Do you have an ORCID ID? If not, don't worry about it. In my slides, I have the 3-step registration process. So the registration process is fairly easy. I'm not going to go into much detail about that. I do have it on my slides, and I'll show it to you now quickly. So that's page 1 of their registration process. Just your name, your email address, and then password, and how visible you want your information to be, or how you want it to be displayed. So you'll see this key, this 3-part key. It says everyone or trusted organizations. Might need to zoom in there for a bit. But you'll see it says everyone, trusted organizations, or only me. This key will appear on every item on ORCID of how you want your information to be visible to people on the internet. We believe that everyone, that option for having everyone being able to access your ORCID ID is best. But if you're not comfortable with that, you can opt for either of these. The trusted organizations will be like the NRF or SAICA, those professional institutions. And then if you only want to lock it to yourself, you can also opt for that, right? So it's fairly simple registration process. And now I'm going to share the 2 ORCID IDs with you. So the first one I'm going to share is Dr. Tim Forsman. So Dr. Forsman is out of our archaeology department. And when we started out with him, there was not much actually here, but he really put in the work and updated a lot of this information. So when we open your ORCID ID, we want to see something resembling this, right? But obviously you're an emerging scholar, you're an upcoming researcher, so you are not going to have it, you will likely not even have all these columns filled in, and that's fine. But I'll still show you how you can improve and update your ORCID profile as you go along. So that's his name. He is Tim Forsman. He has a biography over there. We encourage like a 250-word biography. It's about a 7-liner. It's nice bite size for you to get quickly acquainted with the individual on a professional level, right? So you'll see there's nothing here about like hobbies. If anything, these interests are academic interests. But yeah, so it's just about what he's published. And I think he keeps it updated. So if he publishes a new book, he'll probably update this information. And then you'll see that ORCID URL that we copied for UP journals. That's this one over here. Sometimes you don't need the entire URL. It'll just suffice to copy the ORCID ID. And this link actually brings us to this entire page. So that's the power of ORCID. It succinctly captures all this information in one simple line, right? And then you have website and social links. So you will notice that Dr. Forsman has his project pages as his website and social links. Other people will also add, for example, your work page. So if you have a staff profile on, say you work somewhere and that company has a profile on you, then you can add it here. If you have social media, or maybe you have a website as a researcher, you can also add it here. I've seen that in some instances. And then if you have social media pages that are dedicated to your work, well, you can also upload them here. Maybe you have a YouTube podcast and you discuss your research on there or related fields on there, then you can add those here. And those are quite popular. I think we see those a lot on YouTube. And then keywords. Very, very crucial. I'm going to touch on this a bit more when we visit Dr. Forsman's Google Scholar page. but previously he had what what we would categorize as quite too open-ended a keyword. He has since honed it down so that there's more specificity to the keywords that he uses, and these are his areas of expertise. And then the countries that he's worked in, for Dr. Tim, it's just South Africa, although I know he studied abroad actually. And then his employment history. So he has there his employment history where he's worked, the duration or the term of employment, what he worked there as. So his affiliation is all here. And if you notice, it says source, Tim Forsman. What this means is that he's the one that updated this information. So he punched all this information in manually. And I'll show you why that's important, or how you can do that in a more easier way. So that's his employment information. And then education and qualifications, where he got his PhD, what it was in, his master's, and what he did his master's in there as well. Again, he updated this information himself, so he comes on as a source. And then he also has his honors on there. So for most of us on the call, they'll probably definitely have honors, and then masters, and maybe PhD, eventually a PhD. I know, definitely eventually. And then some of the positions he's been invited to, and what he serves as. He serves on the editorial board of Azania Archaeological Research in Africa, and where it's based, London, in the UK. And then membership and service, just those positions he's been invited to. I'll show you when I go through my ORCID how or what distinguishes, for example, invited positions and distinctions to membership and service. ORCID gives you a brief note of what each item actually means. And then for the most important part, works, right? So this is all his research outputs that he has captured. Again, he's done this manually. So like, I give Prof. or Dr. Tim all the props, because this is quite tedious and it's very cumbersome. But you can see that he still put in the work and did this manually. You don't have to do it manually. There's a way of automating this, and I'm going to show you when I do the demo. But for now, this is Dr. Tim's research. These are his research outputs. And say you're interested in this book chapter that he wrote. There's the DOI. When you click that DOI, it's going to take you to you won't be able to see because I'm just sharing this tab for now, but it'll take you directly to that chapter of the book where you can find it. And if you want to get more details about it, he has again the DOI in the URL, how you can cite it, brief description about the work, when it was added, when it was last modified, and that he's the one that added all this information in. So I'm going to share a different ORCID profile now to show you how you can add, and I'm going to show you as well in the demo, how you can synchronize your research that you have published, right? So that you don't have to be the one adding the works manually. The works will be added on your behalf or written into your ORCID automatically. I'm going to share Dr. Ndlovu. It's ORCID. So this is Dr. Ndlovu. He's also from our faculty. He's also in the archaeology department. And what I am looking to show you is works. We'll also discuss funding shortly, but for now, works. You can see the difference between his and Dr. Forsman's is under source, it says crossref. So how does this happen? As we discussed earlier, every article that you published should come with a DOI if you're a published author. So the DOI is, again, that ID number, that number that distinguishes your article from all articles across the internet. There are no articles that share a DOI, for example. But when you have a DOI, it's issued by this agency, Crossref, right? So Crossref issues these DOIs, and they're able to write your article into your, or information about your works into your ORCID without you lifting a finger. So Dr. Ndlovu actually didn't do this. Crossref did it on his behalf. And you'll see that it's captured in as much detail as Dr. Forsman's. If you open it, you see the URL, you see who the contributors, the co-authors are, how you cite it in big text, speak about that later, when it was added and when it was modified, as well as who the source is. This is pretty much the case for all of Dr. Ndlovu, the research that he has uploaded. He has a ton more research that he's done, and we're going to help him with that, automating more of his research so that it's automatically written in his ORCID. But yeah, you don't have to do the manual labor if you're published and your works have DOIs. They can automatically be written on there. Sometimes they can also be pulled from the big databases that are integrated with ORCID, like Scopus, like Web of Science. So instead of Crossref, it'll say Scopus or Web of Science. And I'll show you briefly how you can do that, although Scopus and Web of Science are super high level. So it's going to be just a brief viewing of how you can do that. And then funding. Again, what you want to see as a potential funder is that a researcher was able to carry on with their work. And that's what you see here with Dr. Ndlovu. He shows you how much funding he received, that he was the lead contributor, the funding amount, the type, and the research outputs related to that funding, right? So as an emerging scholar, that's very important for you if you're looking to get funding. Okay. Now I'm going to show you my ORCID profile so that we can quickly demo it. There's literally quite nothing on my ORCID, which is perfect because we are going to doing our second demo now, right? So if you have already registered into ORCID, then you will sign in. If you haven't, you click register now, which is that 3-part step that I showed you earlier. I usually prefer to access through my institution because I don't have to remember things like my password and so forth. So that's the University of Pretoria, because I have, I'm just going to click that. And wow, okay, it's being super aggressive, but it's okay. And you will see my ORCID page will refresh quickly. So if you're an emerging scholar, your ORCID ID may have nothing on it. If it has some items on it, that's awesome, right? But say it doesn't and it looks like mine. What are the things that you should focus on? That's what we're going to speak about or touch on specifically for this demo, right? I advise the following: a biography of your research and what it's about. Fill all this information in. If you have created an ORCID ID before, you can reconcile the two or consolidate the two. ORCID allows you to do that here, by also known as, you'll just click on that pencil and you'll be able to sync the two profiles together. Your country, where you're based, crucial information, you add that on there. So I'm going to click that little pencil, and then we're going to click South Africa as, and you can actually do this with me. Open your own ORCID and then, yeah, do it. And again, that key that we spoke about visibility settings, it does this for each individual item. For country, who do you want to have access to this information? I'm going to say everyone, but if you wanted to just click trusted parties, then you'd say trusted parties. If you wanted it to be just you, then you'd say you. But for me, I'll go with everyone. So there, it's highlighted everyone, and I'm going to say save changes. If there's more than one country, then you would add that here. Say maybe it's Algeria, then you'll click Algeria. I'm going to leave it just for demonstrative purposes. And then if you only want that to be viewable to trusted parties, then you say trusted parties, for example. If you want to add, again, you go there and then say save changes. Changes are saved, and you see it appears on there on underneath country. Keywords, very, very important. Again, I'm going to speak about this more when I show you the Google Scholar profiles, but add those keywords in there and add them in individual lines, right? So I'm just going to use random keywords. I'm going to say law, let's say economics, and then I'll say Speaker of the National Assembly, right? If you want to arrange them in order of priority, you can do that by moving them up or down. And then if you want to add more, again, you'll use that function, then say save changes. Then your keywords will appear there, okay? If you have other IDs, so what are these? So if you have, for example, a profile on Google Scholar, then you will add it underneath there, right? And you can say who, but this has to be done through integration. You can't manually add this in. It has to be done through integration. So when you integrate your ORCID to your Google Scholar, it will be automatically generated. If you integrate ORCID to, for example, DataCite, then it'll be automatically integrated, right? We'll just say cancel for that. And then my emails and who I want this to be visible to. So if this is my work email, I'd likely say everyone. If this is my personal email, I'd say only me or trusted parties. And it requires verification. I haven't verified this, so I'm going to leave it. I'll just do only me, then close, right? And then your works. So I'm quickly going to show you how you can integrate ORCID to Scopus or Crossref or Web of Science, even Google Scholar. So you're going to go underneath Works, and you're going to click on that Add Works tab, and you'll see a bunch of options come up underneath. You can either add manually, you can import through BibTeX. This you will use if you're uploading from Google Scholar, or you can add DOI, you can add ARXIV ID. We haven't used this much, or you can search and link. So I'm going to click on search and link, and you will see all the repositories come up, from Bfield Academic Base Engine to Crossref, DataCite is in there, Dutch National Bibliotheek is there, Scopus is over there. I've already synced to Crossref, but I'll show you what you would do if you are looking to sync, which I encourage. I definitely encourage targeting Crossref because they are the agency that issues the DOIs. So we'll say Crossref and then click on that Crossref metadata search, right? You'll see nothing is going to come up because I haven't published. So because I haven't published, you won't have any names come up here. But if I had published, then the different articles will come up underneath my name, right? And then I'd be able to sync them to Crossref, and Crossref would automatically write them into my ORCID, as you saw with Dr. Ndlovu. Okay. And then you will do the same for Scopus. You will just click. For Scopus and for Web of Science, you need to have written in a journal that is on their database. So Historia, for example, if you had written or published in Historia, Historia is indexed on Scopus, so you'd be able to get an ORCID or sorry, a Scopus ID or a Web of Science ID. So that's why I keep referring to them as high level, because not just anyone can get a Scopus ID or a Web of Science ID, unlike Google Scholar. So you click that and it would redirect you to the Scopus page. And for me, nothing comes up because I haven't published, let alone in a journal that is on Scopus, right? So yeah, that's quickly how you would sync all of that in. So you should definitely do that, even if you haven't yet published. I know Crossref will let you do it so that your information is automatically written into your ORCID ID, and you never have to worry about, you know, doing the manual labor. But say you have only written your honors dissertation and it's not published, then you'd click go to Works, right? Underneath Works, say add manually, and then you'd be able to add that information manually. You pick a categories, if it's a publication or a conference, some intellectual property or other, and you click it, we'll say publication. The work type, if it's a book chapter, a review, a dissertation or a thesis, you'd be able to choose, and then you'd be able to enter the title, the subtitle. If there is a journal, you would add it there. Otherwise, you would just say UP space, which is our repository. And then the citation type, the citation, your description, the URL. This you'd find on UP space. The identifier, if there is one, and then the identifier URL, and then who you are in relationship to this article. Are you the author? Are you part of the authors? Version of, funded by, right? And then, yeah, you'd add all of that. And then you'd set your visibility settings again. If you want it to be viewed by everyone or viewable by everyone, then it would say everyone. Trusted organizations, then it would be that. If only you, which is ill-advised, but if that is you, then you would say only me. For now, for me, it's always set visibility on everyone, right? So if you've only had your dissertation, do not despair. You should put that work up there because that is your work. So you can definitely still add it under works. Okay. So I would target those areas. If you have employment information added underneath there, same as education qualifications, you can add it underneath there as well. If you've been invited, definitely populate all this information, and that will definitely improve your visibility on the internet. Okay, actually running out of time, so I'm quickly gonna end this demo and we will move on. Okay, back to my presentation. So we've done all of this. I am going to quickly show you through somebody's Google Scholar some tips. I'm going to share some tips with you of how you can make your profile more visible on the internet using real life examples. And then Scopus and Web of Science, I've already told you how you can generate a Scopus ID. It's having it published in a journal that is on Scopus or Web of Science, and then integrating to your ORCID. We've seen how you can do that. Scopus and Web of Science are the largest databases of peer-reviewed multidisciplinary journals. So having your journal that you've written in be on Scopus it's a really big feat because you are rubbing shoulders with, again, the biggest authors, researchers, and journals in the world. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to illustrate using Dr. Forsman's Google Scholar page because, again, we have worked with him. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this presentation and I'm going to share my Google Scholar tab. Okay, I wish I could be more interactive in the comments. I'm so sorry. In the chat, it's just running out of time issue. If you go on Google Scholar and you click and you type Tim Forsman, his name will come up, right? And then you'll click on his name or your name. And these are those tips that I'm sharing with you on how you can improve your visibility. So we spoke earlier about this, why it's important to have keywords that are heightened on specificity. I'm going to show you how Google Scholar works. So Google Scholar has your name. We encourage you to have your name, your affiliation. If you want to put your email address out there, you can do that. Your picture, definitely put your picture on there so that people can be able to identify you. You can't really identify Dr. Forsman there, but you can tell he's knee deep in his research. And then you have his citation information. So you have the metric, his citation H index there at 9, which is fairly good. I-10 index at 9 as well. And then you have the number of citations that they've harvested, I believe, from all of Google Scholar. What happens when your keywords are broad, like archaeology or rock art, is you sort of disappear as a researcher. And I'm going to show you what happens when I click on this keyword archaeology, right? So it's going to rank researchers in order of the highest cited in the archaeology field, those who have added archaeology as their keyword. Now, the highest cited person using the word archaeology as a keyword is Tim in gold at 78,556 right now. Now, you can imagine if it is an order of the highest cited, how long it will take us to get to Dr. Forsman, who's also Tim, but Tim Forsman, to get to his page at 200 citations, right? It's going to take forever. And you can see it now as I go down multiple pages. It's just, this is not what we mean by research, by visibility. We want your name to come up in the first pages, or the first page, if not the first 2 pages, right? And we spoke to Dr. Forsman about this, and he added other keywords like later Stone Age, and you see what happens. He comes on, even though he has 203 citations, because he has honed in on his particular or a very specific area. He comes on in the first page as it being his area of expertise, right? So that's what we're aiming for. So when you're adding keywords, avoid broad or long-ended terms like archaeology. It's such a big space. Just hunker in and hone in and be more specific about your keywords. Okay. So you can create your profile by going on the menu and then clicking my profile. It's also super easy, and you have your name, your affiliation, you say research assistant at University of Pretoria, your email, areas of interest. This is your keywords, and then homepage. You can either use your work page. You can use your work page, and then you'll say next, and then it'll allow you. It'll search all the articles that should come up underneath your name. This is not me, and I don't have any articles, but if you do, they'll come up, and you'll be able to select them, and then visibility or email updating settings and visibility settings. Right, so I have to wrap up now, and I'm going to try and conclude with the following. So remember to create profiles across as many platforms as you can. Zaphesheya is gonna get more into that. And if you do not have your research on Google Scholar, get in touch with your university's repository. For us, it's UP Space, so go on UP Space. If you can't find your honors or master's dissertation on there, contact the library, scholarship, digital scholarship managers. They'll be able to get you a bib text of your journal that you can upload that will be uploaded to UP Space, and that you can use for Google Scholar and ORCID. Thank you so much for your patience. I hope it wasn't too monotonous, and thanks for all the participation with the polls. And I'm going to hand over back to Andrea for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Makone. I think I learned a lot, so I'm sure that everyone else did too. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing more interaction from our students with the different platforms. I'm going to hand over now to Zaphesheya, who is going to be talking about using social media to share your research. I will be running the PowerPoint slide from my side. So, Zaphesheya, if you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, I was having problems with my computer and getting up to Blackboard. So Andrea is going to help me out today, and she's going to run it on her end. So what I'm going to talk about is a site that a lot of academics tend to want to shy away from, and that's using social media. And I understand why it can be a bit overwhelming at times, and also the space is very it's very congregated, and there's a lot of people there, and you may not know how exactly do you want to present yourself on social media. Do you want to be what I call a rock star academic, And there's a lot of those. We have a lot at UP. Or do you just want to be an academic who sometimes casually shares what it is that they're doing in terms of their research, in terms of their teaching, but they also share their personality? So for today, I'm just briefly going to go through the benefits of using social media, how social media allows you to move from a push model into a pull model, how to get yourself started, using analytics, and then the power of infographics, and generally just graphics to get people pulled in and also to communicate something that may be a very big idea through visuals and explain it very simply so that the general public and not only just your academic community can understand. And then we're going to have a little bit of fun. I think it can be fun. We're just going to have a little Twitter challenge. And then to end off, we're going to talk about mental health and using social media. Sandra, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so the biggest question I think people ask is why, right? We academics happen to think that if our research is good, people will find it. But that's not always the case. And one of the things is why use social media to share your research? Because we would think the academic community, if someone wants to read my work, they will find it. So there's a poll, and I just want you guys to let me know, do you use social media? And if you do, I just want to see how many. Oh, wow, a lot of you guys do. Okay, that's great. So what are some of the benefits of using social media? The first one is to generate awareness on your research and increase your download rates. So as you all know, one of the things that we do is we write something, we put it out there, and then we sort of some people just leave it, some others will build on it. So you'll publish like successive articles on it or whatever. But the other part to it is that you need to get people interested in your work beyond someone sitting at their computer typing in a couple of keywords. And you sharing your work on social media can be a conduit towards doing that, right? And one of the great things about social media is that it actually allows us to bypass some gatekeeping strategies that are in academia. And when you are a young academic and you're starting out, there is a hierarchy of some sort, you know, and you now have to try and find a way to not only let people know of your work, but also for you to become visible to the academic community and preferably to the, to the community in general. So use social media to share your work to get people interested and bypass all those gatekeeping strategies. Also, for women in academia and people from minority groups, what we do know is that, and this is from research, oftentimes when it comes to publication and citation, women and people from minority groups don't actually get the most amount of attention, right? Also, in terms of publication, it depends on whether or not you're going to be a co-author or a single author. Co-authors, especially when they're women, tend not to generate as much interest in them. But if you were to then share your research on social media and saying, hey, I did co-author this article with someone, there's a study that I was reading recently, and it actually showed that social media was able to, in some ways, equal a playing field. So people were able to generate interest and were able to increase their downloads because they were able to share it. So the second part is that it encourages engagement on your research and also in your field of study. The really nice thing about social media is that you are able to play around with analytics, and I'll get into this a bit later. But your ability to see what works and what doesn't work is what then allows you to restructure or reformat your content to then increase your engagement. Also, as a young academic, you are contributing to your field of study. And in contributing to that, you do want to generate more conversation about your field of study and not just only your work alone. And so using social media to encourage engagement actually can contribute to that. And lastly, in terms of community, and this follows from engagement, as an emerging scholar, you are sort of kind of at the door, right? And you're entering into this new world. It's got certain players, it's got, there's certain habits, there's certain modalities of doing things. So why not make friends? And go at it with friends rather than going alone. And what you can do is you can share ideas, you can share best practices, you can also share resources. A lot of the information that I have gained over the past couple of years is I've actually learned it from social media. Just yesterday, I was scrolling through and I saw that a lecturer from UJ is issuing a special issue for international relations on Sweden and South Africa relations, and he's looking for people to collaborate on that. And I know a friend of mine who's done research on feminist foreign policy, and I instantly sent it to them, and they were like, "Oh, this is great. Let me, get in touch." So you will get access to information and also access to resources. And online, there are certain communities. So, for instance, on Twitter, the biggest one, and this is for PhD students, but they also do welcome master students, is PhD Forum. And PhD Forum over the years has grown. They now actually host daily kind of writing sessions where people just log on into a writing room and you can write for an hour, for 30 minutes, you can come and you can go. PhD Forum also allows people to post questions so that other PhD students and also postgraduate students and even established academics will then answer your questions. All right, so Andrea, if you could please move on to the next slide for me. Okay, so earlier on when I mentioned some of the benefits of social media is that it allows you to have a shift in how you're going to share your research. And basically, it allows you to move from a pull model to a push model. So what I mean by a pull model is that it's basically the traditional way of sharing information. So you would use a journal, a seminar, a conference, and you would then disseminate your information in that way. And what it allows you to do, obviously, is that you're going to be stuck in a very rigid and very traditional way of sharing information, which still works and it is fine. But also what needs to happen is that someone needs to sit at their computer and they need to type in a couple of phrase words, keywords, or if they actually know that you've written on that topic, they may just have to type in your name and see what research comes up. Whereas in comparison, what a push model allows you to do is that it allows you to transmit and share the information directly. So on whatever platform that you're using, you would then notify people that, hey, I've done this thing. And the value of it is that it allows you as a scholar to initiate the communication. So if you're initiating communication, it means you get to frame how you're going to initiate that communication. And also following up from this, once you frame how to initiate that communication, you're also going to then have a call to action. And you're going to direct or push, the reader towards what it is and how you would then like for them to engage with this communication. So it may be, hey, check out this article that I recently wrote, for example, Mail and Garden, So now they're going to go check out that article. Or I'm going to be presenting at this conference, So now they're going to go look at this conference. Someone may be interested and be like, oh, okay, this is interesting, right? And it has the potential to draw in a wider audience. By this, I mean, if you're going to cast your net quite wide, you can then be able to bring in more people than who would perhaps not normally actually engage with your area of study. All right, so if you can please move on to the next slide. Okay, so getting started. The first step is to choose a platform. If we could just run a quick poll and just let us know between Twitter and Facebook and the most popular one, LinkedIn, what platform are you guys most using? So the first step is for you to choose a platform that you want to engage with. You can use more than one platform, or you can just choose to be very niche and decide on a single platform. So the benefits of Facebook, for example, is that Facebook is a lot more, it allows you to establish a community. It allows for lengthened engagement, so deeper engagement. And the reason being is that Facebook allows for you to be very wordy, right? So you can write like a lengthened post. Also, Facebook does also allow you to be able to upload videos in a series, right? And so that, you know, that video series can be on that alone. Whereas Twitter, you are required to be a lot more concise. I always say, I think the people who do the best on Twitter are people who know how to, you know, who know how to communicate something in a very concise and, you know, like witty kind of manner, you know. Whereas with LinkedIn, LinkedIn is my least favorite platform just because I think there's so much going on all the time. And it has lost the sense of authenticity, but I know a lot of people do really well on it and they actually quite enjoy it. Oh, wow. Okay, so a lot of you guys are on Facebook and a lot of you also use all of them as well. Okay, that's great. And then there's also Instagram. Instagram is a great platform if you know how to be able to use visuals and use pictures really well. And I always say with Instagram, make sure that you're using really crisp, very clean images. So make sure that your resolution is also quite high. A new trend that I'm seeing is that a lot of people are using TikTok to be able to do videos. And there's a couple. There's one who I think is doing really well. His name is Jack Lawson. And he is a philosophy student. He's a philosophy PhD student. And he basically just does videos talking about Western philosophy. And he also does some very practical videos as well, talking about, you know, how to write a philosophy essay. And he's doing quite well. I think right now he's standing somewhere close to, he's got about 250,000 followers and close to 4 or 5 million likes on his TikTok. But again, also, I mean, for him, it's allowing him to communicate something that he's already doing, so it's easier, right? And then step 2 would be decide on what you will share. The first step is getting a target audience. We'll touch more on the target audience in using analytics to grow, but you would have to decide for yourself, who exactly are you going to be targeting? The majority of South Africans, for instance, are aged between 18 to 35. That's just the general population. But if you want to be very specific, you say, listen, I just want to engage with my community, and that's okay. You can just engage with your specific academic community. The second part is make use of visuals, right? And by visuals, we don't just necessarily mean you sharing, you know, infographics of your research. Using visuals is also using pictures. So use pictures that are able to depict, you know, your research. Let's say you're at a conference. Take a picture of you at a conference. If there's a friend who's at the conference, ask them to take a picture of you when you are presenting. Those kind of things. So use visuals to tell a compelling story, not only of your research, but also of yourself. And then the second thing is deciding on reach. I think very early on, when you do set up an account, I think you have to decide how much you want to grow your account, at what speed, and also at the same time, you then have to structure yourself in such a way that you can achieve those goals. So I always say the best way to maximize your reach is to, for instance, use days which are being celebrated either in South Africa or across the world. So for example, we recently had COP26. If your research is on climate change, just transition, the financing of climate change and all those things, you would have used COP26 and you could have shared your research using COP26. And then the other thing also is to then drive traffic to your research externally, or what you can do is to try and drive traffic to your actual platforms itself, right? And then the third part is tips on growing your audience and impact. So Andrea, if you can please go to the next one, the next slide. Okay, so for the next slide, it's using analytics to grow your profile. Now, if you are on Facebook, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter has got a great analytics component to it, where you get to analyze your analytics and you're finding out what is working and what is not working. And also TikTok also does have it. So on Facebook, it's called Insights. And one thing I found is that it will give you a comprehensive account of your analytics and your insights. But one thing I have found is that there's 4 key analytics which I think do help you to, number one, track your growth, and it helps you to find out how you can actually increase your growth and how to position yourself as well. So the first one, which is number 1, which will be the page reach. So we're looking right now at the Humanities Facebook page, and one thing that you can see is over time how much the page has grown. So there's a spike in 1 month, and if you look at that month, you can then go back and see, oh, okay, what was I talking about that month when I had such a huge spike, right? And also one thing you need to know is that reach on Facebook or impressions on Twitter is basically the amount of people who have come across your content. So they may have seen your tweet, or they may have seen a video that you posted on Facebook. It doesn't necessarily then mean that that reach will equate to, for example, a like or a follow. It just basically means how many people have become aware and have seen you, right? So the good thing about page reach is that it allows you to basically see what kind of content over time is getting people's attention, okay? And then on the second picture we have is content reach. And again, this is just the content that people have seen, and it's also the content that was able to be shared. And what content reach is actually premised on largely is that beyond your immediate followers and all that stuff, content reach also taps into the platform's lithogram, right, at that time. And one way in which to align yourself with the lithogram and make sure that you're going to be shared more is obviously using what's trending that day, right? And so content reach will basically just show what kind of posts that you've made that have generated the most amount of impressions. And obviously with this too, what it allows you to do is it allows you to determine what is driving growth. So what kind of images, what kind of wording or phrasing is driving your growth. And then you can use this in the future when you are creating even more content to be like, oh, I remembered it was this kind of picture and I was talking perhaps about this kind of subject. Let me try then tap back into that. And another thing which you can do is if something was working, I always say use a throwback Thursday or a flashback Friday, in the future again, and just remind people that, oh, hey, I did this thing. And obviously, it won't necessarily have the same amount of reach or impact, but it does then keep a continuous engagement almost. Okay, if you could move on to the next one. So the next 2 screenshots that you're seeing is basically a breakdown of your audience. And number 3 is your existing audience details, and number 4 is your potential audience details. Using number 4 can be a bit tricky sometimes, but we'll get to that. So with the existing audience details, one thing that it's great, and Instagram also does this, is that it gives you a breakdown of your audience in terms of age, and it also gives you a breakdown in terms of gender. You will see that it also gives you the breakdown in terms of where are all these people actually residing that you are talking to. So in terms of age, for example, we can see, and this is still the humanities page, is that the large number of people are aged between 18 to 34. That sort of kind of makes sense because 18 to 34 is generally the age of undergraduate and also postgraduate students. something which I found very interesting was that for this page, the large number of followers are actually male. And again, that's also quite interesting because if you think about it, like what is the average profile then of a humanities student? And so that will get you thinking about, okay, what kind of content then am I going to be creating for this particular age group, and also keeping in mind that the large majority of them are male. Also, what this allows you to do, and it's on to the next one, is it allows you to think about your potential audience. And so who do you want to basically extend yourself to and get them engaged, either through a like, a follow, or even a share. So with your potential audience, it actually shifts the demographics, and it says that the potential audience would primarily be female by just a small margin. And this time around, it actually zones in between 18 to 35, but then they say to you, pay more particular attention to like this, to the latter half of this demographic, right? And when I was looking at this, I thought, oh, well, the latter half of this demographic actually seems to be much more of like postgraduate students, and particularly also like younger and emerging scholars, right? And so I think one of the things which particularly these two analytics allow you to do is that once you have perhaps started, and maybe you're a couple of months in, you can use this and you can take stock, and you can ask yourself, okay, fine, if I want to shift, or if I want to consolidate my existing base, how would I do that? And you can use something as simple as just language, you know, just like asking yourself, what kind of language can I use? Would I use a language which is less formal or perhaps even more formal? All right, and if you can on to the next slide for me. Okay, so the next slide is using visuals and infographics. So visuals can increase your engagement by up to 50%. And like this is generally a figure that people throw around. I think on the conservative side, you can look at anywhere between 20 to 50%. What visuals allow you to do is, number one, you optimize your content. So let's say you are in, for example, you're in health sciences, right? And with everything that's going around with COVID and all those things, perhaps you want to communicate, let's say, how many people have gotten vaccinated, and out of those vaccinated people, how many then are, you know, being admitted into hospitals, right? So instead of you sitting at your computer and typing this out and saying out of X, Y are being, you know, you can use visuals to actually present that. It is much more easier for the audience to actually see it and get engaged. In terms of infographics, again, when you're using infographics, you probably are going to be explaining a really big issue or a big idea. So what infographics allow you to do is that it allows you to break it down into specific chunks, right? And then you use that as building blocks. So one will lead on to two, two onto three, and so on. And then a person is able to go with you on this journey. Another thing is that with infographics and visuals, it allows you to reframe your content, restructure your words in ways that people will be able to pick it up a lot more easier. This is especially important if you are going to be communicating with people outside of the academic community. And again, here you would then be wondering, should I be using, you know, heavy scientific jargon? Or should I be using words that my audience will be able to know somewhat what these words mean, right? And then the last thing is, when you're using visuals and infographics, it is important that your profile is public. And the reason why I say this is because if you are going to want to share your profile and it has this visual and this infographic, right? The barrier, one of the biggest barriers, is that you are not public. So you have to actually have whatever profile you have on a public mode. Please do not go private. On Twitter, don't have your tweets protected. So make sure that it's shareable, because let's say you're on Twitter and you've shared this amazing infographic, right? And people are talking about it and tweeting about it. But if it's public, no one is going to be able to see it besides the people within your community. All right. So, Andrea, if you could please move on to the next one. Okay, so in creating an infographic, there are a lot of free resources available online. I use Canva a lot of the time. So I created this infographic process using Canva. Canva comes kitted out with basically like a structure and a format. You get to choose between different ones. So I know that, for instance, Canva has one which I use a lot, which is a process. So this is a process format and structure. So when you're creating your infographic, the very first step is that you need to keep in mind that you have to communicate one issue or one topic. Don't try to talk about more than one thing. Just make sure that it is one big topic that you can handle and feel comfortable around with, right? So the first step is, I always say, try to pose it as a question. And so what you are trying to do is you're trying to solve one really interesting question. So again, using the example of COVID, and you want to then present data on the rate of, for instance, vaccinated versus unvaccinated hospitalization, right? That could be your one big thing that you want to tackle. And you could pose it as a question. So it would be, how many people who are vaccinated versus unvaccinated have been hospitalized, right? And so you begin with that. The second step is to obviously get your data, and it has to be from a reliable source, obviously, and you're going to map it out. So you would map it out separately on whatever other software or platform that you're using. Then the second step is to choose the best chart to communicate your data. So, for example, with this idea of saying how many people are vaccinated versus unvaccinated and are hospitalized, because it's a comparison, I would then say use a bar or a stacked chart. That would be most useful for something like that. If you want to inform people about something, you can use a donut, or those are usually the best one. But if you want to take someone through a process of change, like for instance this one is, you could use a timeline. You can use also something like a cynical one as well, that also works as well. The fourth step is to pick a template. When you are picking a template, you need to make sure that you're picking your template based on structure, right? Not style. And by that, I mean your structure is difficult to change because a lot of these things do come basically pre-packaged for you if you're going to be using Canva. Or the other one, which I've also started using, is something called Vengram as well. Those structures come basically pre-packaged. Now, it's difficult to change the structure of something, but you can change the style, right? So make sure that the structure is going to fit into what you want to communicate. But other things like fonts and colors, those are easily changeable, and those we can, you can do it just at the click of a button. And also number 5 then is to personalize. So add your own, signature and mark on it. For instance, like for this one, the presentation was mostly like in orange. So all I did really was I changed the background. I sort of kind of took the colors, made them complementary to orange as well. And then I inputted the information that I had onto there, and I'm good to go, right? One thing I will say is that try to use headings which are, which are a bit quirky, which get people in. Always distinguish your headings and your subheadings, and that's also something really good. And the 6th one is references. Or as a student told me one day, they thought that we were talking about, you know, what is referencing and how do you reference. And the student said to me, oh, it's like giving a shout out, you know. So make sure that you do reference, and always cite your sources in a way which you make sure that you include the author, the title, the date, the publisher, and the publication year, you know. And that's really good because also it allows whoever is reading to then go on there and, you know, they can pick it up and they'll go to it. If you used your own work, that's also quite great as well. So you are giving a shout out to yourself, but, you know, someone can see, oh, this person has also done this work. They'll click on it or they'll go try and search for it. Okay, and if you'll move on to the second slide for me. Okay, so for this one, I think this can be fun. Please, it's really not that hard. So I wanted to do a quick little Twitter challenge of creating a tweet that explains your work in 140 characters. And so just to do that, the reason why I'm picking Twitter is because Twitter, of course, allows us to be very, very, very concise. So you're going to have to do it in 140 words. I'm going to ask Andrea to go on to my Twitter account. Right. My Twitter account is not the best. My Twitter account is not the best of examples. So yeah. So all right. So I found an article, and this article was basically talking during COP26. I was quite interested in what people were talking about, and one of the things that I was interested in was this just transition. And obviously, some of you may know, South Africa then got that huge loan from the EU, the US, and the UK government. And this is one of the articles that I was actually reading about this whole just transition thing. And this article had a very different perspective, right? So we're going to pretend that, you know, I want to share this article, and it's talking about a just transition. So, for example, the sort of kind of like the key takeaway, which is the argument, is that a just transition can't just be transitioning out of using fossil fuels. It also then has to be premised on us ending unequal relations, right? And so they also talk about other things as well. Yeah, so it's basically, they look at the intersection between labor politics and also climate justice. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and share this on Twitter. So if we can just go back to Twitter, we're going to copy the link of the thing, and then we're going to go onto my Twitter. And so earlier on, I mentioned that the best way in order to generate as much interest in your content is to use what is trending. So for example, on this tweet, I'm just going to research COP26 and research just transition. And the top tweet was from Nancy Pelosi. So Nancy Pelosi from America. And what I'm going to do to try and generate as much interest in my thing, we're just going to go to quote or retweet there. So we're going to quote, and then we're going to try and share this. So for instance, that research is talking about just transitions, but being just transitions not only being, oh, okay. So for instance, since it's a really, really long link, what you can do is you can shorten it. I use bit.ly, and that's bit.ly.com to shorten a link. And you will shorten the link and it saves you space, so you're not then having to make sure that your like the link to the website would perhaps even take a bit more space. Andrea, I've just sent you the shortened link on thingy. But besides that, what we would do if we're going to go back to Twitter, and if you can just erase the link for me. All right, so let's try and share this in 140 characters. So the article was talking about the fact that just transitions are not just the end of fossil fuels. And if you actually look at Nancy Pelosi's tweet, she says that a just transition to clean energy economies, right? But the article was referencing that it has to be a lot more than just that. It has to involve ending unequal relations of labor and also power. So, for example, I would then, tweet, let's say just transitions are more than ending the use of fossil fuels or creating clean economies, and full stop. And then I would say it's about ending unequal relations of labor and power.
Sa?
Yes.
Just repeat yourself, please.
Okay, sorry. So are more than just the ending the use of fossil fuel or creating clean economies. And then full stop. And then at this moment, I would bring in my research, or for instance, this article, since we're pretending that it's mine, but it's not mine. Plagiarism is terrible, but for this time. So we're going to say the article talks about, let's say, full stop, it's about ending unequal relations of labor and power, right? Okay, full stop. And then here you would then present your kind of call to action, which is what do you want people to actually do once they have read, your thing. So what you could do is you could say, we recently wrote a paper on this, read more about it here. And then you would input your link, right? Yeah, and then obviously to further kind of carry on generating the same amount of attention as you were, I would really encourage you to use hashtags. So for instance, with this one, the most popular hashtag was COP26. So you would say hashtag COP26. Yeah, and it would then come up with the official hashtag, and you have been tweeted about something that you have written. Please don't tweet it. So you would then have written about your paper, and it is in less than 140 characters, and it's out. And it was, again, it's a really quick and it's a really easy way of you also just jumping onto something that's already trending and you using that as kind of just the vehicle that you are going to then maximize your distribution and also increase your visibility. But when you are compiling, for example, a tweet, I think what is important is to just remember what I call the big C's, which is be concise, keep it straight to the point, be sharp about what it is that you're trying to say, and be also unapologetic about what you're trying to communicate. The second thing is be compelling. Present a problem, right? Ask what needs to be done about this problem, and then present your solution to it. So the problem is just transition. The problem is, how, for instance, in this way, how are governments thinking about just transition? and they're saying just transitions would allow us to create more clean economies. But then you're going to come around and say, but no, that's only part of the story. The other part of the story is that we have to, end unequal relations of labor and power, right? Be credible. So for instance, where is the information that you're presenting to back up this very compelling story that you're telling? And that information is presented in the link to your article. Also, be conversational. It's not just a lot to just, share something, but be conversational in the sense that issue a call to action. So our call to action was read more about it here, Your other calls to action may be, comment and let me know. Or it could also be something like you inviting people to also share their own research on that topic, right? So to end off with on this one, I really do encourage you all to make yourself more accessible and reachable. And by that, I mean, make sure that on your information page, be it Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, make sure that you actually write all your contact details and all your contact info. So it's not enough just to say that this is who I am, but also include, okay, this is who I am, this is where you can reach me. And it just depends on how much you perhaps would have engaged in a branding strategy. A lot of people just put in just a simple Gmail account that people can be reached by. Other people, for instance, would create like an info account, which again is very, very easy to do, right? So I just want to go back to the previous slide with the Twitter challenge. And I wanted to just demonstrate 2 Twitter accounts, which I think are doing quite well. So on your left-hand side, the Twitter account is Baymouth, and he is a lecturer at Wits University, and he teaches applied mathematics, and he is very interested in math education. So what he actually did was that he created his own personal Twitter account, and then he created a Twitter account for his students. So if his students needed to tweet to him about something, about the coursework, they just wanted to say anything to him, he created this Twitter account to allow his students to do that. Obviously, that is a bit more additional work, but one thing that I did find was that it made him a lot more relatable to his students, because whenever the course was running, students would actually really be tweeting him. Students would actually, engage like in a very respectful manner with him. They may be joking as well. And so his following is quite big. It's like 4,700. But also what he's able to do quite well is that he is able to also then just talk about who he is. He's a big Taylor Swift fan. He's a big soccer fan as well, and he talks about it quite well. And he's also a K-pop fan as well. He also talks a lot about his own personal politics and the things that he believes in. And I think he has done really well in terms of just talking about who he is. And then on the right-hand side, we have Zaphesheya Dlamini. Zaphesheya is a historian, and she is currently writing or has written a book on Winnie Madikizela Mandela. So Zaphesheya is on 28,000.6. And one of the reasons why Zaphesheya was able to, I think, grow her following quite quickly is that Zaphesheya usually tweets about, historical events, and sort of kind of reminds people that, oh, on this day, this thing happened in X year. So, for example, yesterday, she was talking about how the Berlin Conference opened on that day in 1884. And she's been quite successful. And also she has been asked to talk to Milan Garden. She's also been on a couple of radio stations. But the way that Zaphesheya was able to do it really was she took history And she made it educational, but she also made it a bit engaging. And she was telling the stories of history, which we sometimes don't necessarily talk about or engage with. And so I think that's how she's also been able to grow her platform. But also, Zakwana, like the other gentleman I mentioned, is that Zakwana also talks about, her other sides to her life. So she does talk about her personality. She does talk about the things that she's doing a lot more. And, I think she strikes a balance. So she's not completely personal, but, she will share, things about herself. So if we could just move to the last slide. And the last slide is on mental health and using social media. I think it's quite difficult to decide, first and foremost, that how are you going to present yourself? You can be completely and totally professional and curate an image and curate an identity, or you can choose to be like Zakwana, for instance, and be professional and share certain sides of yourself. You just have to try and find a balance. But also in finding that balance, you then have to ask yourself, which parts of me am I willing to share, right? So which parts of my personal life, if you're going to share your personal life, are you going to be willing to share? You may just share that you are a Man United fan, or you are for example, you love to bake. If you love to bake or you love to hike, you can share that. You don't have to, reveal who you are in your entirety at all. Just find a balance. Another way to be able to manage your mental health on social media is using planning tools. So I would advise you, for instance, if you're going to be using Twitter, Twitter allows you to schedule tweets. So you could, for example, just schedule like 3 tweets ahead and not having to log on to Twitter for like maybe 2 or 3 days. Facebook does allow you to do that, but you have a business profile and not necessarily a personal individual profile. Instagram also does allow you to do that, but again, with Instagram, you need to be able to have a business profile on Facebook and then link up your Instagram profile to your Facebook profile, and then on Insights, you can then pre-schedule tweets on Facebook and also Instagram as well. And then the third one with mental health is you need to know when to take breaks. I think if you are growing and you're engaging a lot more, you need to be able to say to yourself, it's getting a bit too much, or the conversation is not what I want to engage in. Let me step away, take a break, maybe for a week, a month, whatever it may be. And if you are going to take that break, consider using the planning tools that they are and pre-schedule your tweets, and also repositioning. So as young scholars, we are beginning this big journey, and we have to identify what kind of scholar and what kind of academic personality or even individual am I going to be. I think you have to be able to strike an identity, know how to communicate that identity as well, and then also factor in, well, do I need to reposition? Repositioning, again, can be something as simple as just changing the way that you talk, using less informal language. It could also be deciding which communities am I going to be engaging with a bit more, shifting towards a certain kind of community or group. And then the last one is, I think, considering if whether or not social media is for you. I began off by saying, we have rockstar academics, and then there's also those academics who are just like, I'm okay. And using social media, you have to decide for yourself, is this something that I want to do? Is this something that I can use to build a brand identity? And if it's not, then it's not. I can just walk away and do the things that I am comfortable in or I am comfortable in doing. And I think this question of, is it for me, is a question we should continuously be asking ourselves along the path that we're walking. And one of the reasons is because you can attain a huge amount of success on social media. And you would have to ask yourself, does it continue to work? Is it for me? Is it not working? Or how can I reposition myself, you know? So that's just about it. If you guys have any questions, I will answer them in the chat function. And I really do hope you guys do consider using social media. It's a great and powerful tool, and it can have so many benefits.
Thank you so much, Shah. That was really interesting. And I think you made some really important points, is how do you present yourself, and what are you putting forward, what are you sharing? Next up, I'm going to take over and discuss how to communicate your research and how to develop your argument. And let me just share my page. Okay, so the first thing is you need to ask yourself, why is communication important? And there are several reasons. Most research at the postgrad level is highly complex and specialized. So a lot of people don't necessarily understand the jargon that is used in the different sectors at a university level, and this is across the university. People in humanities don't necessarily understand some of the technical terms in science and vice versa. So when you communicate, you need to factor in what you're communicating and how you're saying it. The second reason that communication is important is that people only care about an issue if they understand it. It's very easy to just put some information out there, but like we saw with the information about the COVID vaccine or with COVID restrictions, people only started taking it seriously when the emotional side of it came out. People are dying, it's really bad. So people only care about something once they understand what it is. The third thing is that people do not have time to sit and read long academic articles. And this is very relevant in today's society, where we're constantly busy and we're constantly working on different projects and doing different things, especially if you're still in lockdown working from home. So it's very important that when you share or when you communicate your research, you do it in such a way that people don't need to sit and read long academic articles if that's not for them. A fourth point is that if you want change to take place, you need to educate people on issues. So people aren't going to change anything or take anything up with government or hold them accountable if they don't know about the issues and don't understand why it's important. And the last thing is that you need to provide the information in an interesting and informative way. People aren't going to read tweets or Facebook posts or listen to YouTube videos if it's not interesting. So that's really important to consider, is how you're communicating your research. The next thing to consider when you communicate is there are three things. Who is the target audience? So are you communicating your research with the public, with fellow academics, or with government and policymakers? Because that will influence the type of message and the type of information that you're sharing. The broader public does not necessarily care about certain issues, nor do they necessarily understand the high-level technical information. So depending on who the target audience is, you're going to change the method you're using to communicate and the information that you are sharing. The next thing to consider is, what is the environment in which the information is being shared? Is it being shared in a small group? Is it being shared with colleagues in a meeting? Is it being shared in classes? Or is it being shared over social media? All of this has an impact on how you share your information. The third thing is to ensure that there is consensus on information, especially if you are pushing for a specific issue. Different messages confuse people and they stop paying attention. This is evident with the COVID vaccine. you had a lot of different messages over your social media. And eventually it got to a point where you had people who were resistant to getting the vaccine because of the different messages. So it's important that if you are sharing on your own research, you're sharing a concise message that is showing the same thing over and over. There are different types of messaging. So you can share your information through academic research papers and journal articles. You can also share it in working papers or progress papers. You can share it through books and monograph publications, through reports and presentations, through opinion pieces and newspaper articles, and then social media messaging. So I quickly want to go through some of the elements of effective messaging. Communication activities should bring about change in the knowledge, attitude, and practice of people. So when you ask yourself, why am I sharing this message? It's either to change people's understanding of something, to increase their knowledge about something, to change their attitudes towards something, or to change the practice that they are doing. And it's context specific. If you are trying to change the public's attitudes and practice, your messaging is going to be different to if you're trying to change policymakers' opinions. So knowledge is to do with what new things do you want them to learn about the subject? What do you want them to know? Attitudes would be what changes in opinions do you want to stimulate? And practices would be what changes do you want to advocate for? What new things do you want them to do, or what do you want them to stop doing? Effective reports, so this is specifically with reports, but it does link to other forms of sharing research, is asking yourself, why are we communicating this? What is the purpose of sharing this information? And that requires you to think, what decisions is the report intended to influence, and how often are these decisions made? Who are the users? How often should we communicate? So should you be, if you're tweeting, you'll probably be tweeting a lot more often than you will loading a lecture on YouTube. So it's important to think, how often are you communicating? And then what are the information requirements for the specific people that you are sharing the information with? The policymakers need to know the impact of solutions or how this is going to affect the economy, whereas the broader public needs to know, why is it important to them specifically? Why do they need to take note of something? So there are several elements to ensuring that your messaging is effective. You need to use words that are relevant to target audiences. You need to repeat the message using different words. People get bored if you say the same thing over and over. So using different words is a good way to ensure that your message comes across, but it isn't boring. You need to create emotion with your messaging. People respond a lot more when something is specifically relevant, or they can emphasize with a situation. So for example, if I say to you, 22% of people are hungry, it doesn't mean a lot unless I make it emotive. So if I say, can you imagine going to sleep without any food? 22% of people are currently experiencing hunger in South Africa. And this is really bad, because when you're hungry, you can't sleep properly, you can't focus at school, things like that. So you're trying to create an emotion and turning it into a story so that it matters to people. You need to speak to the heart, the stomach, and the wallet. And again, this is context specific, right? For policymakers, they are a lot more interested in how it's going to affect the economy, how it's going to influence investors, whereas the broader public will only take interest if you're speaking to their heart, to their stomach. Is it making them feel something? So issues and language means something to the audience. Another factor is to keep it positive, and with difficult issues such as hunger or climate change, it's difficult to keep it positive, but you can bring in positivity through your action plans or through solutions. So that's really important. I'm going to hand over to Heather Thuynsma now to discuss developing your argument, how you develop information. Heather?
Thanks very much, Andrea. Yes, I had another, well, I run a couple of different things within the Faculty of Humanities, and one of them is I'm the communications manager. And we look very much to encouraging postgraduate students and academic staff members to develop position essays and opinion pieces that we can circulate to key media outlets. You will have noticed if you Google some of our presenters today, you'll see some of them have already published on different platforms, from News 24 on to the Sowetan and a few other areas as well. And I think this is an important area for students to start looking to develop their own academic and research profile. It helps on so many different levels, from your Google to your social media profiles, etc. So I really do think that this is something that it's quite simple, quite easy for you to do and for you to practice. And to be able to practice, one of the journals that we run, that Andrea runs actually, is the Alternate Horizons Journal. And this is an ideal opportunity for you to test your skills on developing some shorter opinion pieces that will then be peer reviewed and copy edited. And if they're good enough, from that profile, we'll be able to send it out to media for circulation and obviously for publication. And if you can get yourself featured on a good online publication, that's going to help your progress going forward. So one of the things I want to suggest is, how do you develop your argument? How do you make an article that we've been talking about over the last little while? How do you make your argument stand out? How do you make people want to read it? Publishers or media want to pick it up and want to develop it going forward. So we've decided this little position essay template, which is a very, very effective way of thinking through a problem, and also a very good methodological way, just generally speaking, of understanding a case study. But that's an academic application, which we won't go into at this stage. So to develop an argument, we want you, obviously, an opinion. Everybody has an opinion, and we want to make sure that your opinion counts and that it is counted by the greater public. So to formulate this position, you need to understand what the problem is. And Andrew's going to give you an example in a few minutes, but here, let's just go through this very quickly. What is the problem what is that burning problem that has you up at night, that fascinates you about a particular situation? Mine, for instance, I'm a political scientist by trade, and I'm curious to know why so few youth showed up in the local government elections over the last 2 weeks. Why did so few young people vote in those elections, when, for me, a local government election is probably the most important election anyone could ever participate in? So that would be my problem, is why. Okay. The next thing is, what are the possible causes of the problem? And as Andrea's presented here on the slide, there are usually multiple causes for this. A good argument, a good opinion piece will outline 3 causes. As we say, you need at least 3 legs on a chair to be able to stand balanced, or to be able to sit balanced. So you want to have 3 at the very least causes for a problem. What is the evidence that you can prove each of these causes? And that's the one thing that is the most important thing that most academics, frankly, forget. They just sort of go off on an opinion, but they do not cite proper evidence. And we sit down and say, all right, I can give you statistics, I can give you a case study, or I can interview somebody and give a good quote. And this is something that is very, very useful, specifically for media purposes. If you can quote people and you create a human element, that's what newspapers are looking for. And granted, yes, we are saying this from the humanities faculty, but this is something that I think even scientists, health scientists, economics majors, lawyers, they all need to remember that eventually you do need to everything you work on is to help mitigate what is a human problem. So my sense is add some human element to it, add a couple of quotes, because that will certainly get your citations up. And if you can, get good quality people to quote for your piece as well. So, I mean, if you can quote the statistician general as one of your causes or your evidence for one of your causes, that is even better. Now you need to look at how you would address this cause. When I worked on political campaigns, one of the first lessons I learned was you never come to somebody with a problem and just leave it there. You have to come to someone with a problem and at least two solutions. It might be that those two solutions are completely unfeasible, but at least you have thought of two solutions. And that's something that the media is also looking for, is the idea in which, so here is the problem, what are possible ways in which we can solve this problem? How do we address the cause? And then if you've got the kind of space, because these shorter pieces are typically around 800 words long, you can then develop a sort of a plan, a rudimentary plan of action in order to achieve that solution. Unless, of course, your entire opinion article is based on that solution and you want to build the plan of action. That's what the focus of the article is. Then you can obviously spend more time on it. So what Andrea's going to show you in the next slide is she's going to give you a sense of now that you've got a position, we're going to show you how you can plan this argument so that you can write it in a compelling way using language that will touch the heartstrings of people who are reading, specifically of editors who are going to publish this as well. So Andrea, you can move on to the next slide, please.
Okay, so we're going to do this step for step, and I'd like to ask all the participants to think about this as we go along so that you can practice getting into using the positions essay template, because you can use it for everything. You can use it for short articles, for academic assignments, for speeches. So it's really good for you to practice using it. So our problem today is South Africa is not doing enough to mitigate climate change, right? South Africa isn't investing in climate change developments and things like that. So what is a cause? What is a reason for South Africa not doing enough? The first cause, there are other immediate issues such as hunger that take priority, right? The government isn't doing enough on climate change because they are focusing on other problems. What evidence can I give to back up the statement? I can provide statistics on more money is spent on hunger alleviation strategies than on actions to mitigate climate change, despite the link between hunger and climate change. So part of evidence will be to make a statement and then to back it up with some stats. So I can go look at how much money is spent on hunger alleviation strategies, how much money is spent in the grant system or on food parcels. And then you can go and look at how much money is spent on climate change adaptation policies or developments in that sector. What is the goal? What is the goal for us in getting South Africa to do more? I'm saying that people need to be educated on the impact that climate change is already having. For example, droughts in Western Cape and floods in Gauteng. So these are problems caused by climate change, and we're already seeing the impact today. So I'm saying that if people are more educated, they want to do more. And I need 3 action steps to achieve this goal. The first is hold rallies on university campuses to explain the problem and the proposed solutions. So speaking to students might get more youth interested in doing something about it. The risk of this is no one will attend the rallies. So what do we do about it? We send out invites on all social media platforms and via email to increase the number of people who see the invite and come to the rallies. The second action step will be to conduct a Twitter campaign highlighting why climate change needs to be addressed urgently. So you go on Twitter, you use the steps that Zaphesheya has shared with us, and you can highlight some of the problems and solutions of climate change. The risk is that not all UP students use Twitter, some don't have access. So what do we do about this? Well, we announced the Twitter posts on campus radio, so Tux FM, right? The last action step to achieve my goal is to write Facebook posts about actions that need to be taken. But what if no one reads or follows our Facebook page? How are we going to still share the actions? We're going to ask student reps to encourage their classes to like and follow our social media pages. So if you look at this, you can see that social media plays a large or has a large role in addressing the goal that we have to address the problem. So now we can say, okay, we have the problem, we have one cause. Like Heather said, you would have to have 3 causes, and each cause needs evidence, needs a goal, needs your action steps, risks, and responses. So this is going to end up being a proper article, so a proper short article, or you can lengthen it. But in general, once you have all of this, you can now make your position statement. So my position statement is, yes, South Africa is not employing enough mitigation strategies for climate change because people do not realize that it is already a pressing problem. So once I've listed the problem, the causes, and everything else, I can then come back to the position statement and actually declare what is my position, and I have given some solution ideas to it. Okay. So now I'd like for you to sit down and think about your own research and think about what you think. So identify a problem, and you're welcome to type it into the chat box, or you can put on your microphone and you can add this in. So identify the problem that you feel your research is addressing. Is there anyone who has a problem that they think of? Once you've identified the problem, your next step is going to be to identify the cause of the problem. So why do you think that is a problem? What is resulting in that problem? Then you're going to provide the evidence to prove that this is the cause of the problem. So in the comments, we have one that says, why do we have so many absent fathers in South Africa? That's a big problem, right? Because fathers play a huge role in ensuring that the youth grow up, for example, with a father figure. So why do you think are there so many absent fathers in South Africa? What could be a cause? So one cause that I can think of is, for example, a lot of fathers have passed away, or another cause is that fathers move into other areas for jobs, right? So if they're moving away, they are not in the house, but they are probably contributing financially. So those are 2 causes, but now we need to provide evidence per cause for why we are saying that is a cause. So evidence would be looking at the statistics of fathers who work in different areas, or how much money gets sent back home from fathers. Then you need to develop a plan of action or a solution to address the cause. So if we're saying that the cause is that fathers are working in other areas, a plan of action or solution is creating more job opportunities in your less developed areas, which is generally where there is absent fathers, or where absent fathers is higher. So you need to create more employment opportunities. Then you need to identify the risks to this solution. So we can create more job opportunities, but what are the risks to that? It requires money. What if we don't have investment to create job opportunities? And this is a risk, but addressing this risk is, okay, if we do not have investments, we need to get more investors by advocating for why it is important to increase your employment opportunities. So you can target businesses and ask them if they're willing to expand or if they're willing to subsidize certain projects. So once you have all of that, you can then look at what is your position statement, and you have backed it up with your problem, with your causes. So it's really good to use the position essay template to develop your argument. Opinions and newspaper articles. So when you're using opinion articles or newspaper articles, you need to develop an argument about something that you feel passionate about. So if you're not passionate about it, you're probably not going to be able to include a lot of emotion or a story. And this means that the reader isn't going to feel your passion through your article. So choose something that you feel passionate about. You should also choose a topic that is relevant to our current life or that readers would find interesting. So for example, a lot of people have been writing about the COVID pandemic because it's relevant to today. You also need to make sure that you're conveying your opinion about a topic. So make sure that you know where you stand and include, but when you do this, include other opinions and then argue against them. There's no point in you giving a list of facts, but we don't know what your opinion is. There's no context to your facts. So it's important to make sure where you stand on an issue before you share it. And you can use the position essay template to do this, is to declare your position on something. You also need to use facts to back up your opinion. This makes it more convincing. When you do opinion articles, you want to keep it interesting. You want to use emotions to help the reader relate. We've already discussed this. You also need to make sure that your heading and conclusions makes your position clear. It needs to be strong and it needs to make an impact. So it needs a punch. When you close strong, it helps the reader remember and think about your article again when they've already left it. So you'll think back and say, oh yeah, I remember I read this, something about this, and then they can refer it to other people. Finally, make sure you edit your work when you are done. So before you submit any opinion article, newspaper article, before you tweet or post a Facebook thing, edit your work. Make sure that your language and grammar is as good as possible. And there are apps that can help you do this. For example, I use Grammarly. It's a free app and it does a lot of the editing for me. So it shows me technical errors. It shows me ways in which to reduce my words, and that makes a better impact. Finally, important for articles, so things to consider. Your title, again, keep it short, keep it catchy. It needs to draw people's attention. Then, as Makone was discussing, if you're using, for example, if you're submitting an article on the OJS system, you need to have abstracts and keywords. So abstracts are important because they get people interested. So the abstract is the first thing they see after the title. And once people have read the abstract, they decide whether they want to continue reading or not. So abstract is really important and it needs to convey the message well. It's usually best to keep it to less than 150 words because when people are reading the abstract, it's the first thing they are reading. Then you need to use your keywords. You need to make them specific to your paper. Most articles, especially on the OJS system and the ESI Press, are peer-reviewed. So, for example, if you're submitting to Alternate Horizons, all articles get peer-reviewed. It legitimizes the information or your opinion, and the reviewers give feedback which will help you develop your argument further. So it's really good to use peer reviewers for especially opinion articles, newspaper articles, academic articles. And then the publishing. Articles can be published on various platforms, such as the OJS system, the University of Pretoria media pages, and newspapers. So some of the articles, as Heather said, some of the articles that get submitted to Alternate Horizons then get sent out to be posted on the media pages, and sometimes they get picked up by newspapers, which is really cool for you to be sharing your information and sharing your opinion on a larger platform, right? Beyond traditional academic platforms, so we've already spoken about most of this, but using social media to share your opinion, sharing links to your research. You can also use podcasts and speeches to connect to a broader audience. You can use opinion articles to share your research in an interesting way. And you can share working papers to start conversations with others interested in your research topic. And working papers is a very interesting concept because a lot of, especially new academics or students that are coming into the publishing area, are nervous to share working papers because they don't want others to use their ideas. But if you already have an idea, you're probably going to have a lot more. And getting a conversation started means that other people are taking interest in what you have to say. So it's better to share it than to keep it yourself. So when you use your research, you're doing it to change minds. Use pictures, use different words, and repeat yourself. So thank you for listening and thank you for attending. This concludes our session for today. So we finished a little bit earlier. If you have any questions, you're welcome to post it in the chat, or you're welcome to email me. Everyone who was registered does have my email address, detoyandrea232@gmail.com. If you want to submit articles, you want to look into using ESI Press for publishing, you can visit our website. I will be sharing the slides and some links to resources that we have mentioned, such as Grammarly, Bitly, Canva. So I will share all of that with you in the coming week. But I would like to say thank you so much to everyone. And a huge thanks to our speakers who participated today. I hope you all enjoyed that. So thank you and goodbye.